Part 1. In Chapter 1, Superior Glokta awaits Lord Ingolstadt in a lavish hall, reflecting on his pain and the political machinations surrounding them. When Ingolstadt finally arrives, Glokta bluntly demands his vote for Arch-Lector Sult regarding the next king. Ingolstadt feigns innocence, but Glokta reveals evidence of his corruption and threats against his daughters to secure compliance. Ingolstadt crumbles under pressure, agreeing to support Sult. Meanwhile, Glokta meets with Arch-Lector Sult and Goyle, discussing the precarious political landscape as rival factions vie for power amid growing unrest and impending chaos. In Chapter 2, Dogman meets an old man, a one-armed man, and a boy while on watch by the sea. He pretends to be a soldier named Craig, sharing drinks with them. Their conversation reveals tensions with the Union forces and rumors of the Bloody Nine's involvement. Suddenly, Dogman and his comrades, Dow and Grim, launch a surprise attack, killing the men. Despite the grim task, Dogman struggles with the weight of leadership and the brutal nature of killing. As they prepare to take the town, they encounter fearful townsfolk, and Dogman offers them a chance to surrender peacefully, avoiding bloodshed if possible. In Chapter 3, the Union forces reflect on their victory over the defenders of Dunbrick as soldiers drag the bodies of the fallen to the moat. The siege lasted 3 months, marked by heavy casualties and failed strategies until a surprise night attack allowed them to capture the fortress. West and Jalenhorm discover gruesome displays of Northmen corpses nailed to the walls, remnants of a past horror. In a briefing, Lord Marshal Burr, visibly weakened, emphasizes the need to move quickly against the Northmen. The captured fortress requires repairs, and tension grows between Generals Croy and Polder over credit for recent successes. In Chapter 4, Jazal returns to Adua with Bayaz and Logen Ninefingers. Nostalgic yet uneasy, he stands up for a beggar, drawing attention. Logen departs, prompting Jazal to confront his feelings for Artie. He rehearses what to say, finally knocking on her door, only to be greeted by a maid. After a brief, awkward exchange, Artie appears, and their reunion is charged with unresolved tension. They discuss recent upheavals, including battles and the death of Prince Ladisla. Their conversation escalates into a tumultuous encounter, revealing both passion and pain, ultimately leaving Jazal conflicted and regretful. In Chapter 5, Glokta meets Lord Wetterlant in a park where they discuss political maneuvering. Wetterlant reveals he controls 4 votes on the Open Council and is weighing offers for them. Glokta mentions a bid of 15,000 marks per vote from His Eminence, but learns Wetterlant has higher offers from others. After their meeting, Glokta returns home and encounters Captain Luther, who is now an officer in the King's Own and seems changed. Inside, he finds Artie West, who is dismissive of his concerns about her involvement with Luther. She mentions Luther's recent travels in the Old Empire, hinting at connections to the Northmen Ninefingers and Bayaz. In Chapter 6, Pharaoh expresses her disdain for the opulence of Adua and Bayaz's lack of action against the Gurkish. She feels trapped and misses Ninefingers, questioning her loyalty to Bayaz. Quay warns her about Bayaz's unreliability, suggesting she should leave, but Pharaoh insists on her independence. When Bayaz enters, she confronts him about her unmet desire for vengeance. Bayaz reveals that they cannot leave due to the ongoing war, dismissing her complaints. Newcomer Yoru Sulfur discusses their plans with Bayaz, mentioning Glustrod's book, which they did not find. Pharaoh leaves, overhearing Bayaz's conversation with Lord Isher. In Chapter 7, Jazal reflects on his relationship with Artie after their passionate reunion. Despite memories of their tumultuous past, he expresses his love for her, and they share intimate moments. However, their time together is interrupted by a visit from a maid, delivering a message from Lord Marshal Varuz, who urgently needs Jazal. After a brief conversation with Artie about the possibility of resigning from the army, Jazal learns of a peasant revolt incited by a man named Tanner. The closed council appoints Jazal as commander of the response, leading to his troubled acceptance of the task. In Chapter 8, Logen returns to Ufrith, now under Union control, with a letter from Bayaz to join a convoy for the front. He bonds with young soldiers, but during a camping trip, they are ambushed, and Logen kills the attackers, revealing himself as Logen Ninefingers. He confronts an officer, proving his loyalty by presenting severed thumbs. Logen learns about northern forces against their king from west and is welcomed back by the Dogman and old comrades. However, he faces hostility due to his past, especially from Shivers, who reveals his hatred for Logen for killing his brother. In Chapter 9, Glokta meets Harlan Morrow in a slaughterhouse to discuss